Up next, we touch upon this week's economic indicators here in South Korea amid the ongoing geopolitical uncertainties. For more on that, I have Professor SHIN SANG-HYUP at KYUNG HEE University live on the line. Professor SHIN, welcome.
My pleasure.
Professor, South Korea's inflation accelerated to a 6% in June compared to a year ago. Now, this rate is reportedly the highest in nearly 24 years. Do you expect a further acceleration? And if so, what options are there, Professor, to cope with these surging consumer prices, do you think?
Considering economic climate surrounding Korea and the global community, I think the acceleration of consumers' prices would continue for a while. In fact, the USA economy is suffering from high inflation, and the other major economies do have same difficulties in the economies. The options available to us, we don't have many options. I think the one maybe most important options available to us to cope with the surging consumer prices is the financial policy, interest rate policy. By increasing interest rates, the many governments, or the South Korean government also try to do that, to stabilize consumer prices. And I think that will be the first step to revitalize the slowdown economy, I think.
Right, which is something the president has also agreed upon. Professor SHIN, South Korea's foreign exchange reserves also shrank in the month of June by the most since the 2008 global financial crisis. I wonder, is this a source for concern?
Not yet serious, I think. As you pointed out, over the last 4 months, $30 billion foreign exchange reserves, Korean foreign exchange reserves reduced. So at the end of the May, the South Korean foreign reserves were ranked at the 9th places in the world. So the foreign reserves we have at the end of May was $438.28 billion. I think this is not, quite enough to manage some economic difficulties facing us. But the point which I want to underline is that, the trade balance, very recently we have the trade deficit. And considering global economic situation, we cannot expect the the improvement of the trade balance of South Korea. So I think if we should have to settle down this issue as soon as possible. What I mean is that if the trade deficit continues, for a while, it can be emerging as one of the direct threats to the Korean economy. And at that time, the foreign exchange reserves, Korea's foreign exchange reserves could reduce further, then there will be serious economic threats to the Korean economy, I think.
Right, I see. Professor SHIN, President Yoon Suk-yeol, as we covered earlier, has spoken about intentions to aggressively cut expenditure at public entities to better allocate funds for public support. How feasible are these intentions?
Well, I think it's quite feasible because that, President Yoon has ordered a reform of the public sector, calling for sale of idle assets and savings and expenditures. And at the policy meeting, President Yoon himself emphasized that he will preside over the meeting on the economy every week to address pressing economic issues, including reform of public enterprises, soaring consumer inflation, as you mentioned before, which is at the 24-year high, and then the rising the energy costs. So considering his intention, such a kind of commitment, I think we have to wait and see, but I think there is a possibility that he will improve the situations in our Korean economy, which can be a stepping stone for this recovery of slowdown Korean economy, I think.
Right, hopefully, of course. Professor SHIN, the Bank of Korea is widely expected to further raise its key interest rate as part of efforts, of course, to rein in inflation. Now, that being said, how do these rate hikes look to raise the risk of recession here on the local front?
Well, the key interest rates, as I explained very briefly, well, because of the COVID-19, many countries, including Korean government, have used this so-called financial policy to provide more money to the market. By doing so, they want to revitalize, slow their economies. Because of this one, then the many countries, Korea also, facing the high inflations. Very recently, head of the IMF, she emphasized that the inflation rate should be curbed at the 2% level, 2% level. So means they want to stabilize curb the inflation rates. I think to do that, the Korean government is considering and has increased the key interest rates. But if we increase the key interest rates, certainly the dark side of this policy is the threat of the economic recession. So the question is how much the percentages we are going to increase with the government increase the key interest rates. But anyway, we don't know. Nobody knows. But certainly, what is certain is that the USA, the Federal Reserves, is going to increase the key interest rate further. As you know, well, they already took a giant step very recently. We should also increase the key interest rate at least as many as the USA government does. Otherwise, lots of the foreign capitals will leave from Korea. So it could be another factor, threat to the Korean economy. So I think the Korean government will increase the key interest rates, but how many percentages, it will be very carefully considered, and then should monitor the other governments, particularly such as USA government, the policy, financial policy. So we should cooperate with other governments in this context.
And very briefly speaking, Professor Shin, what are your thoughts on the possibility of a stagflation in the near future as predicted by some pundits here?
It is coming very close. We cannot deny that it's getting closer and closer to us at the moment, but I want to keep my fingers crossed. Right now, the new government led by President Yoon Suk-yeol is right now doing their best to keep the dynamism in the Korean economy. So if they manage to stabilize the prices, consumer prices first, certainly I do think that that can be a first step to revitalize, slow down Korean economy, I think.
Right, I see. Well, I'll keep my fingers crossed as well. Professor SHIN SANG-HYUP at KYUNG HEE University, thank you very much for your thoughts and your time.
My pleasure.